All right, we have more changes unfolding in U.S. markets and presidential politics. Changes that have big money flowing into a Trump Republican victory. And I'm going to say this right off the bat. No, we are not only talking about Polymarket. There's been this push by left-wing media claiming the betting market surge for Trump has been fueled by a handful of large investors. Well, wait for it, because what they're not telling you, what they won't tell you, is that the big banks, the big trading desks at these banks are now reporting hedge funds and investors, big ticket investors, are pouring in bets for not only a Trump victory, but a potential sweep election, which could make all the difference for what comes after November 5th. But before we get started, thank you for liking and sharing these videos. It really helps out the channel, and consider subscribing so you don't miss these regular updates. So we now have 2 weeks until Election Day, 2 more weeks before November 5th, the most consequential election in decades. You know this, a make or break election for the U.S. economy. Take a look at this chart. This is the federal government's expenditures to service our national debt, folks. Harris Biden are now spending over $1 trillion a year to simply service our debt. $1 trillion a year on interest. In the last few weeks, they borrowed an additional $450 billion, almost $500 billion, just to pay the interest we owe. Spending like drunken sailors, spending like we did during World War II, as a percent of GDP, that is. Meaning, this is how you spend money when you're dealing with some existential crisis, a war or a pandemic or whatever. During peacetime, government spending should fall. It's why Trump's pulling away with it. Voters know that Kamala had 4 years to fix this. Instead, they made it worse. And look, right off the bat, Trump has all the momentum right now. All the momentum in the week before Joe Biden was replaced, the week following that disastrous debate performance. Trump also had all the momentum. Pundits and polling analysts back then, they were talking about a potential landslide victory for 45. Then Kamala replaces Biden and the momentum shifted a bit. Not a ton, but there was definitely a shift. Well, now 2 weeks to go, folks, and it's rotated back to Donald Trump. The pendulum has swung back again. Kamala Harris is now literally in the same spot that Joe Biden was before stepping down. Let's just start with Polymarket, as it's been all over the news. Everyone's talking about it, so let's get it out of the way. The people now betting Trump will win on November 5th, a nearly 15-point spread. Bets for Trump totaling $586 million this week versus Kamala's $395. 15 points is massive, a massive gap, and establishment media knows it. They are flabbergasted at how to handle this, how to respond to it, how to spin it. Left-wing media first chose to ignore the story, but they can't, so now they're trying to explain it away. First, Mark Cuban came up with the idea, the brilliant idea, that betting markets mean absolutely nothing because U.S. citizens can't participate. Saying this first on Bill Maher over the weekend and then repeating it everywhere he goes. Watch.
Polls and where this election stands, clearly your candidate was, at least it seemed, doing better than she was doing better a couple weeks ago than she looks like she's doing today. If that's true, why do you think that's true?
Who knows? I mean, that was the regular season. This is the playoffs. It doesn't really matter. It's what happens going forward. And, you know, like every candidate always says, you got to play like you're 1 point behind. So that's what we're doing.
You're a markets guy. What do you think of Polymarket? What do you think of some of the other marketplaces where people are effectively taking bets on this election? And again, what looks like a big move for former President Trump.
Well, let me first say I'm an indirect investor in Polymarket through a fund that I'm in, a crypto fund that I'm in. And I know that you're not supposed to be an American and bet on Polymarket. And so it's not really an indication, I think, of anything. And I don't really know what hedges are out there. So it's possible to, bet on one side and not bet on the other. And from all indications, most of the money coming into Polymarket is foreign money. So I don't think it's an indication of anything.
Then other corporate media like your CNNs and MSNBCs started to report that the major lead Trump has is due to just 4 big money investors, they said, who helped move the market for him. which is another cope. It's copium because they don't know how to respond to this. Their job right now is to keep momentum up for the Kamala team. You got to give it to them. They have a very difficult job right now. I mean, they're better off throwing in the towel than making a fool out of themselves, pretending she has a shot with numbers like these. But here's what they're not telling you and won't tell you, probably because they don't even know it's happening. But even if they did, I doubt they would report it, that it's not just Polymarket. It's not just these new betting sites that are popping up. Forget the betting sites. How about the U.S. equity markets? What are they telling us? Well, the U.S. stock market is now, quote, all in for Trump. Major investment banks and their trading desks sending client notes out over the weekend, breaking this down. All the big guys, B of A, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, Deutsche Bank, all putting their money where their mouth is and recommending to their clients to buy the Trump trade. JP Morgan's positioning intel team released a report yesterday in which John Schlegel summarized it by saying this: the recent hedge fund positioning is quite simply all in on Trump themes. Now, we're going to dive into this in a minute. It gets a bit granular, but it's important. And first, just to add context to this, going into the presidential election, the month of October is usually a very dull month for markets. Not much movement happens. It's been that way historically. The October before the presidential election, markets basically stall out unless there's the possibility of a sweep election. If one of the two parties is favored to shift the balance of power in Washington, then things start to move and can move bigly. Major positioning and bets unfold in the weeks before then. And I showed you last video, B of A's Michael Arnett predicting this same thing last week, that the sweep odds had suddenly jumped last week. Well, he just doubled down again. If you watch this channel regularly, you know I personally put a lot of stock into Hartnett's analysis. He's, in my opinion, way more right than he is wrong. Well, in his latest Flow Show note, he writes this: tail of the tape, latest presidential election win probability now has Trump at 61% versus Harris 49%. More relevant, though, to markets is election sweep risk, now at 44%, driven by GOP sweep probability surge from 20 to 33% in the last week. GOP sweep 2016 was sweet for stocks, oil, US dollar, sour for bonds and gold, though. Price action past week shows banks, small cap stocks, US dollar front running 2016 bull moves, gold and oil now diverging. And here's the sweep probability in this chart. Take a look at this. US election sweep probability priced at 44%. Look at the massive shift in the odds. October 8th, a Trump Republican sweep was only 20% likely. By October 17th, last week, it jumped to 33%. Today, it's jumped another 6 points. That's a major move, a major jump. And realize what this means. A sweep election changes everything. Up until this point, nobody thought that was even a possibility. They thought we'd have a split government. So the fact that the markets now are betting the odds of a Republican sweep means it's possible there could be major volatility coming to markets, because when one party controls all levers of power, they can implement change, right? And it can fundamentally change markets. Now, since this note was released by Arnett on Friday, the other big investment banks have made similar statements. According to Goldman Sachs, the Trump Victory Index just hit an all-time high, while the Kamala Index is back to Joe Biden low levels right before he dropped out. You can see that here. The Republican Party Victory Index now at an all-time high, Zero Hedge says. This corroborates what we're seeing in the betting markets. On the copium, we're hearing from the left-wing media that the Polymarket numbers are an anomaly, are just false. JP Morgan also released a note writing in their summary, as odds of a Trump presidency and red wave have increased over the past few weeks, we've seen themes that are perceived to be Republican winners outperform Dem winners by around 7% over the past month. They go on to write this: markets are now all in on Trump themes. Ladies and gentlemen, this is good news. Big money funds don't shift strategy like this for political or for partisan reasons. They do it based on hard facts, on data, on flows. You could take it to the bank that the big funds like Point72 and Citadel have access to all the private polling from all campaigns across the country. They have teams of people, they have machines, they have algorithms that process all of that before making any kind of shifts in capital. So it looks more and more likely that Trump is just pulling away with it. And you can see that on the ground in states like Michigan and Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, the blue wall states that Kamala needs, that she must win, those must-win states for Kamala. She's losing. Polling was just released surveying Arab voters, for instance. Arab voters are moving against Kamala this election cycle. You can Google it and see all the attention that Arab and Muslim voters are getting in the last few days. A major voting bloc in Michigan, a voting bloc that Joe Biden carried handedly in 2020. Well, they want nothing to do with the Kamala Harris team or the Democrat Party anymore. There's this great clip of MSNBC sitting down with a group of Arab and Muslim voters yesterday. Just here, it's right here. Watch as the host just is flabbergasted when learning how much these voters despise Kamala Harris. It's a priceless clip. Watch this.
Who was voting for Donald Trump in 24?
It's possible.
It's possible.
Yeah. It's definitely not by Harris, that's for sure.
Who's voting for Kamala Harris here? Absolutely no.
No. Not possible.
There's nothing she can do or say for us to change our mind.
Donald Trump has said he will reinstate the Muslim ban.
He said that last time.
He's said that he wants Netanyahu to finish the job.
Donald Trump said a lot of things his first time around that terrified me. The campaign that the Democrats ran was that Donald Trump hates us. I felt safe, though, in the country when Trump was in office. I don't feel safe right now with Kamala in office.
And I will say, as we put the story together, I was hard-pressed to find someone who was voting for Kamala Harris in the Lebanese community in Dearborn.
Look, she's in such bad shape now that her campaign is fighting for the Liz Cheney type Republicans, the Nikki Haley, Liz Cheney type Republicans. And you know they're desperate if they're doing that. When Democrats, when anybody really, rolls out at Cheney in this day and age, that's like the last thing you want to do. And they have to know this, but they believe if they can just peel away even a few thousand extra votes, that sliver of rhino-type Republicans, maybe it could make a difference. Spoiler, it won't. Again, all of the momentum right now is with Donald Trump, all of it. And now that Wall Street's positioning for a Trump victory, it means there is more than just noise here. There's more than just this background noise behind this. There is data to back this up. And look, will we see a sweep election? It's unlikely, but the odds have jumped 20 points in the last week. That's a big deal. All right, that wraps up this episode. Like, subscribe. We'll see you next time.